boys and girls. Today we're going to talk about teaching girls to pick up guys in London. I went into London this weekend to meet up with some friends of mine, and most of my clients are girls. This isn't what I do, but I have done it, and I have had these discussions with people and with female friends, and it's an interesting topic of discussion because people usually assume that there's going to be a difference between the principles of how you would teach guys to get girls and how you teach girls to get guys, and there really isn't. There's most of it is exactly the same. So the question that I was asked was, by a girl. I said, no, you don't. I haven't told you yet. How could you possibly know? This girl was asking me about a guy at her work who she really likes, and she's too shy to talk to him. And I said, okay, have you smiled at him and said hi? And she said, yeah. And when you smile at him and say hi, does he say hi back? She says, yes, he does. I said, okay, well then, could you escalate it a little bit further and just maybe go from hi to hello, how are you? And she was like, no, I couldn't possibly do that. And the problem that she's in now is that, she's pretty sure that he likes her. He's obviously quite shy as well, and that she likes him too. But it's gone on for so long that there's now a tension there, and she finds it hard to break. So there's a few things that we ended up having a conversation about. One of the key issues when you're talking to people is a problem of shyness. People often say, I'm shy. And particularly in London, where you've got a lot of people working in offices, and they get on the public transport, they're surrounded by huge numbers of strangers, and then they go to work and they're surrounded by more strangers, and then they come home and they do what they do. It tends to breed a rather insular approach to life. And most of my friends in London, they're British-born Chinese, which then can add another layer of insularity. They tend to just hang around with other people who are BBCs as well. And as a generalisation, you could say, and I've just come back from Asia, you could say that generally speaking, Asian culture is a little bit shyer, especially around this particular issue. So what do? Well, one of the things that I was saying is, look, you can learn to not be shy. You can train yourself to be more extroverted. I've done it. I suffered very badly from social anxiety disorder in my teens, to the point where I couldn't even walk into a shop and buy half a pint of milk without my voice shaking. My hands would physically shake and I would sweat. To this day, even though I've trained myself, when I do public speaking, in any environment, if I'm talking to more than 5 people at one time, I will still sweat profusely unless the air conditioning is brought right down. I remember talking to somebody about that a few years ago, and they went, oh, it's because you're high energy and it's the adrenaline that's pumping through you. And I'm like, nowadays I'm thinking, yeah, maybe, or it could actually be some of that retrained anxiety that's to do with social anxiety. Why are people so shy? Well, by nature, if you don't discipline yourself and you don't train yourself, you will tend towards shyness. And the reason for that is the greatest human fear on this planet is not spiders, is not death, it's humiliation. We fear humiliation more than anything else. We know that we fear humiliation more than death because people will die in order to avoid humiliation. At a cultural, national level, people will go to wars and die in order to not face cultural and national humiliation, right? So it's a deeply rooted fear. So we've got to train ourselves to be less shy. And the reason, another reason why we have to do that, if you're looking to get leverage on yourself, to train yourself out of shyness into self-assertiveness and extroversion, especially for girls living in London or girls living in any big city who want to get on with their lives and want to get into relationships, is this. If you meet a guy and you know that you would like to try seeing him and try and be in a relationship with him, how long is it going to be of you sort of testing it out and seeing if you like it or not before you get to know whether you really like that guy or you don't? Now, when I speak to people under the age of 40, I personally think that there is a naivety about how long it takes to get to know somebody. Me personally, I would say if you've not lived with somebody for a year or more, you really don't know them. And I've witnessed firsthand in other people's relationships where it took them 12 to 14 years to really realise what they're dealing with. So my larger point is this: we haven't got time. We unfortunately, as humans, we're just not programmed to live that long that you can afford to just waste a year being shy with some guy in the office before you then do a year with him and then go, oh, I never really liked him anyway, or it won't work for us, and then 2.5 years your life has gone by because then you need 6 months to get over the dude, right? So you've got to try and get past this pattern that is called shyness. Remember that shyness is easy. Extroversion is tough. Extroversion takes energy. Cities do, I think, encourage or can encourage, living a city life can encourage shyness. So you can train yourself to be more extroverted. I have a course called the Self-Assertiveness course that will help you to do that. It's not for helping boys to pick up girls or helping girls to pick up boys per se, but in trained certain patterns of extroversion you will need. Now, why is this? Well, basically what happens is that people go cold. In the pickup community, they talk about warm-up sets, and actually it's almost like, it's called warm-up sets in the same way we do warm-up sets in strength training. I wouldn't pick up an 80 kg bar and start trying to clean and press it without doing some warm-up sets first, because my body will break. You've got to let your body physically let the blood flow, let the oxygen get into the muscles, and let your whole system start to warm up and prepare for activity. It's exactly the same way in psychology. And this actually comes, the pickup community took it from sales psychology. In sales psychology, they would talk about, when the pickup community talk about cold approaches, that's straight from sales psychology. In sales psychology, we call it cold calling. That means you approach a customer who you've never seen before and you have to build rapport quickly. In pickup, they call it cold approaching. For girls looking to get with guys, that would be you seeing a guy in a club who you've got no rapport with, you know nothing about him, you just like the look of him, and you find a reason to go over and start talking to him. That's called a cold approach. When you're warming up to do that, either on a night out or just generally in your life, and I think generally in your life you should get into this because it's a lot of fun and will make you feel good, is you just start talking to people more, and you will actually feel yourself kinesthetically and physiologically warming up. I suspect that this is because of the instant gratification and reward and endorphin release of talking to somebody, being in a good state, being cheerful, conveying value, making another person who you don't know smile or even laugh, and offering some kind of value, and then this feeling good. So then you start to train your brain to associate good, positive feelings to talking to people you don't know and feeling good. But if you're going to talk to, say, like a stranger on a train, or somebody who you're at work with who you don't know, who you have no sexual interest in, how does that relate to you talking to people who you do have a sexual interest in? Well, here's the thing, ladies. Good-looking guys who you don't know yet are still in the subcategory of humans, and they're in the subcategory of humans who you don't know well. Humans who you don't know well are called strangers. So if you don't have, to use the physical analogy again, if your muscles for talking to strangers are weak, then you've got to do some reps, you've got to do some exercises to strengthen the muscles for talking to strangers. And you've got to warm up to it. You've got to get used to being able to talk to strangers. So you need to practice talking to anybody and everybody, and getting that entrained extroversion going, so you're just talking to people, and then when it comes to boys, you'll be able to do it more easily, and then when it comes to good looking boys who you actually quite like, you'll still be able to do it. It will get more difficult. The more you like the guy, and it's the same for boys when we like girls, the more you like the guy, the more difficult it's going to become. Because the more you like the guy, the more pressure there is you're placing upon yourself. The more you stick him on a pedestal and be like, oh my God, he's so wonderful. And then you start decorating the living room and naming your kids before you've even got his phone number. Then the more pressure there's going to be inside of your head. But generally speaking, for most of us, we could do with being more extroverted. And you must learn to practice this extroversion and practice talking to strangers, even if you're not sexually interested in them, because that will keep you in a state of being warmed up. The momentum, the psychological momentum of striking up conversations over nothing will be there. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you need to learn state management. Your state your physiological, your psychological, your emotional state, how you feel right now, your energy right now will transmit. So if you enjoy these videos, it's because I deliberately use NLP techniques on myself to get myself into a certain state that will induce a sense of optimism, curiosity, enthusiasm, and all these other good feelings, so that as I'm talking in this state and you're listening to me, you'll feel that way. A very simple example of this is, I'm sure you've got friends who, if you talk to them and they're often negative and depressed and downbeat, and their physiology is like this, and their tone of voice is like this, and the facial muscles are like this. You know, the micro expression for just giving up, depression, apathy, and they'll ask questions like, what's the point? Or they'll constantly complain about other people. Then it doesn't feel good. You don't feel good talking to people like that. On the flip side of the coin, if you're talking to your friend and they're trying to tell you a story that is funny, but they're laughing so hard they can't, and they have tears of laughter running down their face, like, wait, oh my God, wait, you will start laughing. But why? You've not even heard the funny story yet. You don't know what it is that they're laughing at, but you'll start feeling good and you'll start laughing as well, because your state transmits. This is called empathy. So you see somebody suffering and you start to suffer as well. You see somebody in a good state, you start to go into a good state as well. So you've got to learn to manage your state. You can't walk up to that good looking guy when you're in a really bad mood, or your manager's just shouted at you, or something's gone wrong, and try and talk to them, because you're going to be conveying impatience, you're going to be conveying anger, whatever it is. You must go into a good state first, a good positive state, cheerful preferably, optimistic would be nice, playful, flirtatious is even better, and you need to give value, so you need to make the other person feel good. If you've never done that before, I suggest you start practicing today. Learn how to make other people feel good for no reason whatsoever, other than that you can. It will make you feel good as well. Get out there and spread the love, spread the good karma. With no agenda. You've got to do it with no agenda as well, so you get good at doing it when you have an agenda, because you're trying to get the guy's number. So that's two things you should do. The third thing that came up was we were talking, there was like a mixed group on the table, and this became the topic of conversation. And some of the people on the table are already married, so they don't really care, but they're just interested in the psychology of it. Where do you meet people, and what do you say when you've met people? Me personally, I don't like nightclubs and bars. There's probably 1,001 really good reasons why you shouldn't use nightclubs and bars as the main source of potential new partners. For one thing, you'll be in an altered state of consciousness because there's alcohol present. They'll be in an altered state of consciousness, and it's just not a fantastic way of doing things. I prefer to do it in a sober state where I can hear them and they can hear me, and I don't have to shout, and there isn't that whole weird, strangely competitive, slightly neurotic, desperate, hysterical drive that comes from being in a room that is essentially a dark box filled with dry ice and flashing lights and mind-numbingly loud music, whilst people are imbibing drugs that make them feel even more numb and out of their own bodies and their own correct state of mind and sanity, to then start trying to find somebody who's a potential mate, to use the biological term. There's something Richard Bandler says a lot, and I think it's a very good piece of advice, which is that people in good states make good decisions, like when you're sober and switched on and happy and healthy, and people in bad states make bad decisions. Prisons are full of people who abuse drugs regularly, and a lot of the worst crimes that are committed when people are in an altered state of consciousness through drug abuse. So I prefer shopping malls, coffee places, gyms, that kind of thing, where I can actually talk to the person and hear them and get a sense from where they're coming from. And I would recommend you do the same. And the girl I was talking to, who likes the boy in the office but can't talk to him anymore, or can only say hi and then run away, she was saying, I went to the supermarket yesterday after work and there was a lot of good looking guys there, and I was like, you know what, you're right, I lived in Canary Wharf for a short time, there's a little Tesco's there, and if you went into that Tesco's after the banks have all kicked out, it'd be great, it'd be like full of really, really good looking women. And I was saying to her, yeah, that's a good idea, because also then you can look at their shopping and you can tell if they're single or not. And she was like, my God, that's really stalkerish. And I was like, it is, but you've got to use the intelligence the environment offers. And she was like, okay, so I see a good looking guy in a supermarket. So that covers where to meet people. Then it's, what do I say? Now I'm sat next to my friend who's also of a more extroverted mindset, and we were like, just talk about anything. Just talk about what's there in the environment. And that really didn't give her traction. She couldn't really understand what we were saying. And a few of the other people around the table were like, I couldn't do that. I couldn't just talk to somebody about what's there. And I went away and I thought about it more, and I thought, you know what? Have you noticed how observational comedy, all comedy nowadays is observational comedy. There's very few stand-up comics out there who have acts like, you know, puppets, and there's a few, but like puppets and you know, stage magic, I guess. You get a few people who do that, but most stand-up comedy now is observational comedy. Have you noticed how it is? The reason why I'm asking, have you noticed how most stand-up comedy is observational comedy, is because that's the template for stand-up comedy. Have you noticed how when you call your credit card company, X, Y, and Z? Have you noticed how when you're driving in traffic, X, Y, and Z? So I then started to say, well, maybe that's the format we should be using. Not that you have to be a hilarious stand-up comic. You don't need to get to like Louis C.K. levels in order to, you know, get some guy's number and have a drunken fumble with them. You just need to be able to observe what's there in the environment and reflect that back. And you can talk about anything. As guys, I think if a girl started talking to me in a supermarket over nothing, my first thought wouldn't be, what's she saying? What's the content of what she's saying? And is it interesting and intelligent? And it wouldn't be that. I'd be like, oh, this girl's talking to me. Wow, she's brave. Good display of self-assertiveness there. You know, regardless of whether I'm into her or not, I'm certainly going to give her the time of day because that took guts. That would be my first response. And the few times where girls have come over and approached me, I always give them, you know, be nice to reward the good behaviour of, whether I'm interested in them or not, to reward the good behaviour of actually going across and saying, hey, how are you? Because it takes guts to do that. So you've got to get good at forming conversations about nothing and just observing what's there in the environment. And she mentioned supermarkets, so I was thinking, is there any stand-up comic routines I've ever heard about supermarkets? And actually there is. Observational comedy. Andrew Dice Clay does a bit about not letting people in the queue in the supermarket because he's a dick, and he's like, well, why doesn't anybody let anybody else in the queue in the supermarket? Because we're all dicks, blah blah blah. Bill Burr does a really funny bit about supermarkets that make you swipe your own food, check your own food, and pay as another way of basically conning you into, and so that they have to do less work. There is stuff out there if you just look and just think about it and reflect and just talk. You can talk about stuff. You don't have to be funny. The pressure isn't there for you to be. These guys have to be funny. You don't have to be funny. You could just talk about anything, or you just walk up to a guy and ask him a question that's relevant to the environment, and that will do. So try and entrain your extroversion. Try and get yourself into a position where you can just be chatty and extroverted, be warmed up and talking to all people all the time. Like, if you don't want to, then don't do it. But if I was in a position where I'm like, oh, I know that I'm gonna... There was a situation recently, there was a girl in a gym that I really liked, but I put her on that pedestal because that's what humans do, because we're silly like that. Even though I knew the psychology of it was the more I pedestalize her, the harder it's going to be for me to talk, because the greater the potential gamble is, right? Then the more stress I'm going to feel, and the more locked up we are, the weirder we are. All humans, boys and girls, are exactly the same. I've had girls come up to me and try and talk to me, and they're clearly locked in stress. And I think I spoke about this in another video. It can make them very, very aggressive. They start being very passive aggressive because they're angry with me. Then they're like, "Fuck you! How dare you make me feel stressed? I fancy you, and I fucking hate you for making me. How dare you?" And I'm like, "Wow, you just brought this just evil energy into my chi space, man. Could you just take it away so I can put back up the unicorn wall?" Yeah, away you go. So you've got to be very, very careful with that kind of thing. I totally lost my point there. I just started thinking about unicorns. Oh, okay, and rainbows. Wow, you should be thinking about unicorns and rainbows and puppy dogs. State management, yes. So you've got to get yourself into a good state of mind before you talk to the other person. If you put somebody on the pedestal, it's going to screw you up, like I did with this girl in this gym. She's not really a girl, she's 43, but I thought, oh, she was amazing. She's so confident, so poised, arrogant. Oh, it's amazing. So what I would do when I knew she was going to come in, and I knew I was going to, because I had built rapport, yay for me, NLP, master practitioner, psychology graduate, life coach, and I'm like, I built rapport with a girl I like. I'm awesome. And so eventually what I started to do was I was like, I've got to break out of this. So what I would do is I would deliberately and consciously get out of my own head, and be just chatting to people. And I'd be like, she is a person, she's in the subcategory of people who are here, just start. And that worked for me, because then your state transmits, right? So if I was just in a chatty note, so instead of getting like a slightly stiff guy talking to her going, hi, how are you? She's getting a chatty guy who's just chatting to everybody. There's also an element there of social proof, which is probably more important for girls to see than for boys to see, but it's important for boys to see as well. You know, if you're going to talk to me, and I see that you're already talking to a bunch of other people and laughing and joking that you have mates, that means you're not a weirdo. It sounds harsh, but we're all doing that. So if I see you chatting to other people and I see you've got friends, then that pre-qualifies you as somebody who's not nuts. There are other issues here why there's a difference between the gender psychology of this, but I'll get into that in another video maybe. So you've got to stay in a good state, you've got to be chatting to a lot of people, you've got to pick the right venue. I really don't recommend bars and clubs. If you want to do bars and clubs, then do, you know, enjoy it, but just be careful. Use protection. Yeah, try and get used to talking about stuff in the environment, you know, whatever it is. Supermarkets, they keep moving everything. So you'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, do you know where the tomatoes are? They keep moving everything in here. And maybe you could build rapport and then go, yeah, they do. They keep moving everything in here. Do you want sex now? That's what you're hoping for. Do you want my babies? Because you asked me. You gotta build rapport. You can't get somebody's phone number without rapport. You can't get on a date with somebody without rapport. You can't have sex with somebody or build a relationship with somebody without rapport. And the only way you're going to get rapport is by talking to them. Make words come out of your face and go at their face whilst your faces are looking at each other, and that will lead to where you want to go. But you should try and learn to do that and feel good at the same time. So all of these issues came up. There is no major difference between what I would, or what anybody should teach girls versus what you would teach boys. Ultimately, there are certain key elements to every endeavour in life. Like if you want to get stronger, you've got to pick up heavy weights, right? Ronnie Coleman, the bodybuilder, has a good line on that. He says, everybody wants to be a bodybuilder, but nobody wants to lift no heavy ass weights. In selling, you know, you've got to get up earlier and try harder and think more if you want to sell more. If you're, whatever it is, you've got to put in work. But there are certain things you just can't avoid. And in this field, when I'm talking to guys, the one thing that they want to avoid is, you know, getting the trainers on and actually getting on the track and doing the do. What they want to avoid is the moment of walking up to a girl and talking to her. And I'm like, well, all the ebooks and YouTube videos and whatever else in the world is not going to be better than you just walking up to the people you find attractive and just talking to them. So do maintain a good state, stay cheerful, stay optimistic, enthusiastic, and do convey as much value as you can. And one final point for the girl or anybody who's stuck in this sort of thing where you both know that you fancy each other, but you're both a little bit shy and you've established a certain pattern of behaviour, you're going to have to run a pattern interrupt strategy on yourself. Pattern interrupts in NLP means you interrupt the other person's pattern. That's a pattern interrupt, because I was talking to you and then I clapped in your face. It's kind of a rude pattern interrupt. Naughty Richie. If you're going to pattern interrupt yourself, you've got to notice where you're doing something through inertia and habit and just go stop. Just stop doing that and do something else. That hurts. That will always hurt a little bit. You know, like I said, when it comes to doing anything in life, like if you want to get stronger or you want to make more sales or you want to get that promotion at work or you want to lose weight, you've got to be prepared for some discomfort. It's going to hurt a little bit because you want to stay the same. It's homeostasis. It's a biological principle, biological drive. Stay the same, stay the same, stay the same. Change is going to be uncomfortable a little bit. So in that goal situation, I would just say you're going to have to pattern interrupt. You're going to have to make yourself do something that is going to be a little bit uncomfortable, which is go from hi to hey, how are you doing? Where are you going for lunch today? And then just seeing what happens. Because at the end of the day, if you don't, who's going to care? As Eckhart Tolle says, one day even the sun will die. What's the point? You know, in 100 years, who's going to remember our names? Nobody. So you may as well try. What's he going to do? He's not going to like turn around and cut your head off. That was something Richard Bandler said actually on a course. I will finish on this story. He said that he noticed when people got scared of talking to members of the opposite sex, that he just looked at what they were doing inside of their heads at the level of a strategy. What's the movie they're running? And he said he spoke to one guy who couldn't talk to girls, who's just incredibly shy of talking to girls. And so he found out what he was imagining. And imagine this is a strategy. So the guy would look at a girl that he liked across a bar, and then he would vividly, with good strong imagination, first person, imagine walking across the bar, going over and saying something to her and stuttering. She turns around, he's vividly imagining this, she turns around with this look of contempt on her face. She's like, ugh, get away from me. And all of her friends are like, ha ha, and everybody laughs at him. And then as he walks away from them, his trousers fall off and everybody in the bar just goes, ha ha, and laughs in his face. Now if you did that specifically right before talking to somebody that you liked, that would make you not want to talk to them, because your brain's going to go, this is really dangerous, dude, don't do it. This is super dangerous, so don't do that. The other thing, on a totally different seminar, different period, like that came from a seminar that I saw face to face with Richard Bandler in London in '96. I found an old video of him talking in the 80s, and he said when it comes to flirtation and shyness, the people who are really good at being flirty and who aren't shy are people who imagine it going really, really well. And I always do. I imagine it going really, really... if I think about it at all, which I don't, I'll just talk to people and I just assume it's going to go well. And you could say that's arrogance. And I'd say maybe it is a kind of arrogance, but isn't it the kind of arrogance that you would like to adopt? I'm not doing it out of cruelty. I'm not seeking to exploit anybody. I always give value. And I always seek to make the other person feel good. So if you imagine it going really, really well, then it tends to. And I also have a thing in my mind which says, okay, imagine if it goes horribly wrong, what will you do? And I'll be like, you know what? I know what I'm going to do when it goes horribly wrong. I'm just going to smile, I'm going to walk away, and I'm going to think about it, I'm going to break it down, and I'm going to get over it. I'm going to get past it, right? And I have that as like a please break an emergency thing on the wall inside of my head. I'm waiting for the day. I'm waiting for the day where I get horribly shut down by a girl that hasn't happened yet. It must eventually. That's just mathematics, that's statistics. And to be honest with you, I keep moving country and changing and doing stuff all the time, so I haven't got that much time to go out chasing girls. But if I do have a lot of time to go out chasing girls and I do get horribly shut down, I will report it here, because that's honesty, that's what it's all about. So final point, there are titles of books that I really like. There are two titles that I think are wonderful without even reading the book. Sometimes you read the title of a book and you just get the entire message through the title. It's fantastic. There were two classics in the 90s of personal development. One was called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. I think I have read bits of that book and I remember it being pretty good. But you've got to take the title of the book, Feel the Fear, Do It Anyway. Fear is not don't do it, fear is be careful. The message of fear is be careful, not don't do it. So you feel the fear and do it anyway. And the other one was you can't afford the indulgence of a negative thought. You can't afford the indulgence of a negative thought. And I would extend that and say you can't afford the indulgence of being shy. Shyness is a kind of weakness. No, shyness, I don't mean to guilt yourself here. Shyness is a way of keeping yourself safe. But recognize it for what it is. It's a biological imperative to keep you safe. Homeostasis, I don't want to change, I don't want to risk, I don't want to get outside the cave where there are tigers and things that could go horribly wrong. But ultimately, there is only life outside the cave, isn't there? There's no life inside the cave. You've got to get out there, you've got to try, and you've got to experiment, and you do need to be ready to fall down and scuff your knees. You'll get over having your knees scuffed, it'll be okay. It'll be okay, it'll be fine. But you can't afford the luxury of a negative thought. You can't afford the luxury of living in shyness. There isn't enough time, we're not alive for long enough. So get out there and play, have fun, make sure if you're enjoying it and you're doing your best to have the other person enjoy it, it's probably going to go quite well, surprisingly well, but you've got to try it to know that for yourself. Okay, thank you for your time and your attention. I'll speak to you again soon.